They said his son was broken. They said the heir to the Rossi crime family would never hear his father's voice, never hear the cock of a gun, never hear the scream of a betrayal. Vincenzo Rossi, the most feared don in New York, had billions in the bank and an army at his command, but he couldn't buy a single sound for his 4-year-old son, Leo. He was ready to burn the world down in frustration. That was until a broke, exhausted waitress in a run-down diner pulled a strange, rusted device out of her apron pocket. She didn't call a doctor. She didn't ask for money. She just struck the metal against the counter. And for the first time in 4 years, the Mafia boss's son turned his head. What happened next wasn't a miracle. It was a declaration of war. You need to hear this story. The rain in Seattle didn't wash away the sins of the city. It just made the pavement slicker for the getaway cars. Vincenzo Enzo Rossi stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse suite atop the Rossi Tower, looking down at the grey, weeping city. He held a glass of 50-year-old scotch in one hand, but he wasn't drinking. His knuckles were white against the crystal. Behind him, the room was silent. Oppressively, violently silent. It was a silence that cost him $50,000 a month in specialists' therapy and experimental treatments. "Enzo," a voice rumbled from the doorway. It was Luca, his underboss and oldest friend. The specialist from Zurich called, Dr. Weber. Enzo didn't turn around. And he returned the retainer check. The glass in Enzo's hand shattered. Amber liquid and shards of crystal rained onto the plush Persian rug. But Enzo didn't flinch. He didn't even look at the blood welling on his palm. He said there's nothing more he can do. Luca continued, his voice dropping an octave heavy, with a pity Enzo despised. He said Leo's condition is auditory neuropathy of an unknown origin. The nerves are there, Enzo, but they don't fire. It's like having a telephone wire with no electricity. He said you should accept it. Enzo turned, then his eyes dark-rimmed with the exhaustion of a father who hadn't slept through the night in 4 years. Accept it. I run the entire eastern seaboard, Luca. I decide which politicians keep their seats and which ships dock in the harbor. And you're telling me I have to accept that my son, my only blood, will never hear me say, I love you. On the carpet, surrounded by imported toys that made no noise, sat Leo. The boy was 4 years old, with curls of black hair and eyes the color of polished obsidian, just like his mother May. She rest in peace. Leo was building a tower of blocks, totally oblivious to the shattering glass or his father's thundering voice. Enzo walked over his Italian leather shoes, crunching on the glass shards. He knelt before his son. He waved a hand in front of Leo's face. Leo looked up, offering a small, fragile smile. He reached out and touched Enzo's cheek. The boy didn't know his father was shouting. He didn't know his father was crying. I will fix this, Enzo whispered, though he knew Leo couldn't hear it. It was a promise made to the silence. If I have to tear heaven and hell apart, Leo, you will hear me. But heaven was silent, and hell was about to get a lot louder. 3 days later, the pressure became too much. Enzo couldn't breathe in the penthouse. The sterile smell of the doctors, the sympathetic looks from the maids, it was suffocating. He ditched his security detail, a reckless move for the don of the Rossi family, especially with the tensions rising with the rival Falcone syndicate, and took the blacked-out SUV. He drove aimlessly for hours, eventually ending up on the outskirts of the city, in a neighborhood where the streetlights flickered and the potholes could swallow a tire. Leo was buckled in the back asleep. He looked like an angel, untainted by the filth of his father's world. Enzo's stomach growled, reminding him he hadn't eaten since the call from Zurich. He pulled into the gravel lot of a place called the Rusty Spoon. It was a chrome and neon relic from the 50s that looked like it had been dying for 30 years. Perfect. No one would look for the King of Seattle here. He carried a sleeping Leo inside. The bell above the door jingled a sound Enzo registered, but Leo did not. The diner smelled of stale coffee, frying bacon and lemon floor cleaner. It was empty save for a trucker snoring in the corner booth. "Sit anywhere you like, hon. Just don't sit at table 4. The leg's wobbly." The voice was raspy, tired, but warm. Enzo looked up to see a waitress behind the counter. She looked to be in her late 20s, though the dark circles under her eyes aged her. Her name tag, crooked and pinned to a stained yellow uniform, read Clara. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy bun, escaping in wisps that framed a face that was pretty, but guarded. Enzo slid into a booth in the back, laying Leo down on the bench seat, covering him with his suit jacket. Clara walked over, pot of coffee in hand. She didn't flinch at Enzo's $2,000 suit or the diamond watch on his wrist. In this part of town, rich men usually meant trouble, but she was too tired to care. "Coffee," she asked. "Black, and a grilled cheese for the boy. Cut the crusts off." Clara scribbled on her pad. She looked at Leo sleeping soundly. "He's a heavy sleeper. That bell on the door usually wakes the dead." Enzo stiffened. "He's not sleeping. He's deaf." The air in the diner shifted. Usually people said, "Oh, I'm so sorry," or "That must be hard." Enzo waited for the pity. He hated the pity. But Clara didn't apologize. She just paused, her pen hovering over the paper. She looked at Leo. Really looked at him, studying the shape of his ears, the way his jaw slackened in sleep. "Profound?" she asked. It was a clinical term, odd for a waitress in a roadside dive. "Complete silence," Enzo said, his voice hard, daring her to push. "Since birth. The nerves don't conduct." Clara's eyes narrowed slightly, a flash of something sharp and intelligent breaking through her exhaustion. "Auditory neuropathy spectrum disorder, or cochlear aplasia." Enzo froze. He slowly turned his head to look at her. "You know a lot of medical terms for a waitress, Clara." She flinched, as if caught in a lie. The mask of the tired waitress slammed back down. My grandma was deaf. I read a lot. Grilled cheese crusts off. Coming right up." She hurried away, but Enzo watched her. He watched the way she moved, efficient, precise. Not like a waitress, but like someone used to high-pressure environments. He noticed her hands. They were rough, scrubbed, raw, but her fingers were long and steady. When Leo woke up 10 minutes later, the nightmare. Ma began. It started with a low whine, a sound Leo made in his throat when he was frustrated. He was hungry, and the lights of the diner were flickering a visual overstimulation that terrified him. Because he couldn't hear, Leo relied heavily on sight. The flickering neon sign in the window was driving him into a panic attack. He started to scream. It was a guttural, terrifying sound, the scream of a child who cannot hear his own volume. The trucker in the corner woke up with a snort. "Hey, shut that kid up." Enzo shot the man a look that would have frozen lava, but his focus was on Leo. "Leo, hey, look at Papa. Look at me." He waved his hands, trying to sign, "Calm down. It's okay." But Leo was thrashing his eyes, squeezed shut, terrified of the flashing lights. He knocked the water glass off the table. It shattered. Leo didn't react to the noise, but he felt the vibration of the slam and screamed louder. "I said shut him up," the trucker yelled, standing up. He was big drunk and stupid. "Some of us are trying to sleep." Enzo stood up. His hand went instinctively to the waistband of his trousers, where his custom .45 sat. "One more word," Enzo hissed, "and you sleep forever." The trucker took a step back, realizing too late that he had barked at a wolf. But Leo was still screaming, hyperventilating now, his face turning purple. Enzo felt that familiar helplessness clawing at his throat. He could kill the trucker. He could buy the diner. But he couldn't stop his son from crying. "Move!" It wasn't a request. Clara was there, shoving past Enzo. "Don't touch him," Enzo warned, grabbing her arm. "Let go of me, you idiot!" Clara snapped, her eyes blazing. "He's not throwing a tantrum. He's in a sensory loop. The frequency of that neon sign is 60 hertz. It's creating a visual stroboscopic effect that's overloading his visual cortex. Since he can't hear, his brain is overcompensating with visual processing. He feels like he's being attacked." Enzo let go, stunned by the barrage of technical jargon. Clara didn't reach for Leo. She didn't hug him. Instead, she reached into her apron pocket. Enzo tensed. If she pulled a weapon, she was dead. She pulled out a piece of metal. It looked like a tuning fork, but it was modified longer with strange jagged grooves filed into the tines. It looked like junk. "Hey!" Enzo shouted as she brought it down hard on the formica table. Thwack! The fork didn't make a sound. Enzo could hear clearly, just a dull thud. But then Clara held the vibrating metal base against the wooden table right near Leo's elbow. The effect was instantaneous. Leo stopped screaming. He gasped, his eyes flying open. He didn't look at the flashing light. He looked down at his arm. Then slowly, incredibly, he turned his head toward Clara. Leo's eyes widened. A look of pure, unadulterated shock crossed his face. He reached out and touched the vibrating fork. A giggle, a real bubbly giggle, escaped his lips. Enzo felt his knees give out. He grabbed the edge of the booth to stop himself from falling. What did you do?" Clara lifted the fork. Leo whimpered, reaching for it. She smiled a genuine, soft smile this time, and placed the handle gently against the bone behind Leo's ear. Leo's face lit up like a Christmas tree. He looked at Enzo. He pointed to his ear. "He can hear it." Enzo whispered, the air leaving his lungs. "How the doctors said his nerves were dead. They said nothing could conduct. His nerves aren't dead," Clara said quietly, her voice devoid of the waitress accent now. She sounded authoritative. "Dangerous. They're dormant. They're out of sync. It's not about volume, Mr. Rossi. It's about resonance. That tuning fork is calibrated to 432 hertz with a disruptive overtone. It bypasses the cochlea and vibrates the skull directly into the auditory nerve stem. It wakes them up." She pulled the fork away as the vibration faded. Leo clapped his hands, looking at her with hero worship in his eyes. Enzo looked at the waitress, really looked at her. He saw the intelligence, the fear she was trying to hide, and the unmistakable shaking of her hands now that the adrenaline was fading. "Who are you?" Enzo asked, his voice low. Clara shoved the fork back into her pocket and took a step back. The fear returned. "Just a waitress. That grilled cheese is on the house. You should go." She turned and fled toward the kitchen. Enzo looked at Leo, who was now calm, tapping the table, waiting for the vibration to return. Enzo pulled out his phone. He dialed Luca. "Luca, run a background check. Clara, waitress at the Rusty Spoon on 4th and Main. I want to know everything. Who she is, where she came from, and why she's hiding in a dump like this. Boss, is everything okay?" Enzo watched the kitchen door swing shut. "No, Luca. Everything has changed. I think I just found the one thing money couldn't buy." The dossier hit Enzo's mahogany desk with a heavy thud less than 6 hours later. It was 4:00 a.m. Leo was asleep in his soundproofed room, clutching a new toy, a vibrating pillow Enzo had ordered immediately. Enzo sat in his study, the smoke from his cigar curling into the dim light. Luca stood across from him, looking uneasy. "You're not going to like this, Enzo," Luca said. Enzo opened the folder. The first photo was a mugshot. It was Clara, but she looked different. Younger. Angrier. Her hair was dyed black, and she had a split lip. Name, Clara Mitchell. Alias. Real name, Dr. Clarissa Vance. Former position lead, neuro-audio researcher, Johns Hopkins University, Baltimore. Status fugitive. Wanted for questioning regarding the death of Arthur Pendleton, CEO of Omicron Pharmaceuticals. Crimes, industrial espionage, grand larceny, manslaughter. Enzo stared at the photo. "She's a doctor. Not just a doctor," Luca corrected. "She was a prodigy. She graduated MIT at 19. By 24, she was leading a black-budget project at Johns Hopkins called Project Echo. They were trying to cure deafness using neural resonance. But 3 years ago, the lab exploded. Her boss, Pendleton, was found dead inside. The research vanished. So did she." Enzo ran a finger over the file. "She's not a killer, Luca. I saw her with Leo. She saved him from a panic attack with a piece of scrap metal." "The feds think she stole a prototype," Luca said. "A device worth billions. Omicron put a bounty on her head, not a legal one, a black market one. $5 million for her head. The Falcone family has been sniffing around for a tech asset recently. I think they're hunting her too." Enzo closed the file. The anger that had been simmering in his gut began to boil, but this time it had a direction. "She's hiding," Enzo said. "She's working for tips and living in fear because she has the one thing the world wants." "What do we do, boss? If the feds find her, she goes to prison for life. If the Falcones find her, they'll torture the tech out of her, and then kill her." Enzo stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. He walked to the window, looking out at the city that bowed to him. "She made my son hear, Luca. For 4 years I prayed to God, and he gave me silence. She gave me a miracle in 10 seconds. He turned back, his eyes cold and resolved. "Get the car. We're going back to the diner." "To bring her in?" Luca asked. "No." Enzo checked the chamber of his gun. "To hire her, and if the Falcones or the feds come for her, they'll have to go through me." The speedometer on Enzo's Maserati hit 120 mph as he tore down the highway toward the outskirts of town. Luca was in the passenger seat, gripping the handle, his other hand clutching an assault rifle. "We're 5 minutes out," Luca shouted over the roar of the engine. "But the scanner is picking up police chatter. Someone reported a disturbance at the diner." "It's not the police," Enzo said, his knuckles white on the wheel. "Police don't scramble frequencies. That's the Falcone family." Enzo drift-slammed the car into the gravel lot of the Rusty Spoon. He was too late. 2 black SUVs were already parked at odd angles, boxing in the entrance. The diner's front window, the one with the neon sign that had terrified Leo, was smashed. Enzo didn't wait for Luca. He kicked his door open, pistol drawn, and sprinted toward the diner. He heard a scream inside. It was Clara. Inside the scene was chaos. Tables were overturned. The trucker Enzo had threatened earlier was unconscious on the floor. 3 men in tactical gear. Falcone soldiers had Clara cornered behind the counter. One of them, a scarred enforcer named Raymond, had a handful of her hair, yanking her head back. "Where is the prototype, Clarissa?" Raymond growled, pressing a knife to her throat. "We know you didn't destroy it." Clara was bleeding from a cut on her forehead, but her eyes were defiant. "I told you it's gone. I melted the circuits." "Liar!" Raymond hissed. He raised the knife. Bang! Raymond's hand exploded in a mist of red. He screamed, dropping the knife, and staggered back. Enzo stood in the doorway, his gun smoking. "I believe the lady asked you to let go." The other 2 hitmen spun around, raising their weapons, but Luca was already flanking them through the side door. 2 quick shots, efficient and brutal, dropped them before they could pull their triggers. Raymond, clutching his mangled hand, looked at Enzo with wide, terrified eyes. "Rossi, what are you doing here? This is Falcone business." "She belongs to us." Enzo walked forward, stepping over the shattered glass. He looked like the Grim Reaper in a bespoke suit. He stopped inches from Raymond. "She doesn't belong to you," Enzo said calmly. "She's my son's pediatrician." Enzo pistol-whipped Raymond across the face, knocking him cold. Silence fell over the diner. Enzo turned to Clara. She was shaking, pressing a rag to her bleeding head. She looked at Enzo, then at the bodies, then back at Enzo. "You," she breathed. "You're Enzo Rossi, the mob boss." "I am," Enzo said, holstering his weapon. He extended a hand to her. "And right now I'm your only option. The Falcones know you're here. The feds are probably 10 minutes behind them. If you stay here, you're dead. If you run, they catch you." Clara looked at his hand. She was smart enough to know the odds. She looked around the diner, her sanctuary, for the last 3 years now destroyed. "Why?" she asked. "Why save me? You're just like them. You want the weapon." "I don't want a weapon," Enzo said, his voice softening just a fraction. "I want to hear my son laugh again. That tuning fork. It wasn't just metal, was it?" Clara hesitated. "No, it's a quantum resonance conductor." "Pack your things, Dr. Mitchell," Enzo said, using her alias. "You're coming with me." She didn't take his hand. Instead, she vaulted over the counter, grabbed a battered duffel bag from under the register, and shoved the tuning fork and a small lead-lined box into it. "I'm driving," she said. Enzo almost smiled. "No, you're not." The safe house wasn't a basement or a warehouse. It was Enzo's penthouse, the fortress in the sky. Clara sat on the edge of a velvet sofa that cost more than she had made in 3 years of waitressing. Her duffel bag was at her feet. Luca stood by the door, arms crossed, watching her like a hawk. She had stitched up her own forehead in the bathroom, refusing help. She was tough. Enzo respected that. Enzo poured 2 drinks. He handed one to her. "Drink. It helps with the shock." Clara took the glass, but set it down on the coaster. "I don't want a drink, Mr. Rossi. I want to know the terms of my imprisonment." "You're not a prisoner," Enzo said, sitting opposite her. "You're a guest and an employee. I will pay you $10 million. I will give you a new identity. I will fly you to any country with no extradition laws." Clara laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "And in exchange, you cure Leo. You finish what you started in that diner. You make him here." Clara's face fell. The defiance drained out of her, replaced by a deep, haunting sorrow. She slumped back into the sofa. "I can't," she whispered. Enzo leaned forward. "Don't lie to me. I saw it work." "You saw a temporary jump start," Clara snapped. "That tuning fork induces a temporary theta wave synchronization. It forces the nerve to fire for a few minutes. But if I use it too much, it will burn out his brain stem. It's not a cure, Enzo. It's a side effect." "A side effect of what?" Enzo asked, his voice dangerous. Clara reached into her bag and pulled out the lead-lined box. She opened it. Inside sat a device that looked like a hearing aid, but it was made of black matte metal and pulsed with a faint blue light. Project Echo wasn't designed to help the deaf hear, Clara said, her voice trembling. The Department of Defense funded it. They wanted a device that could broadcast a frequency into a soldier's ear to increase reaction time, eliminate fear, and suppress pain. A super soldier serum, but digital. She looked up at Enzo. But we made a mistake. The frequency didn't just suppress pain. At high intensities, it overwrote the will. We created a mind control device, Enzo. Arthur Pendleton wanted to sell it to the highest bidder. Terrorists, dictators. I tried to destroy the data. The lab exploded. Arthur died. I ran with the only prototype. Enzo stared at the small black device. It looked harmless, but men had died for it. The device stimulates the auditory nerve directly, Clara continued. That's why it works on Leo. His ears are broken, but his nerves are just sleeping. This device wakes them up. But if I calibrate it wrong, even by a fraction of a hertz, I don't just give him hearing. I could wipe his personality. I could turn him into a drone. Enzo looked at the ceiling, thinking of his boy upstairs. Can you modify it? Strip out the weapon. Leave only the hearing. I need a lab, Clara said. I need equipment that costs millions, and I need time. But the Falcones are out there, and Omicron has mercenaries looking for me. If they find us, they won't just kill me. They'll take the device and use it on everyone. Enzo stood up. He walked to the window. Luca, Enzo said. Boss, buy Omicron Pharmaceuticals. Clara choked on air. What? You heard me, Enzo said, turning back. Hostile takeover. Buy the controlling shares. If we own the company, they stop hunting you. As for the Falcones, Enzo's eyes went dark. They touched you. They threatened my son's doctor. I'm going to wipe them off the map. Just then a small sound came from the hallway. Leo was standing there in his pajamas, holding his teddy bear. He looked at Clara. His eyes lit up. He recognized the lady from the diner. He ran to her. Clara froze, then instinctively opened her arms. Leo climbed onto the couch and buried his face in her shoulder. Enzo watched them. For the first time in years, he felt hope. Can you do it, Clara? Enzo asked softly. Can you save him without hurting him? Clara stroked Leo's hair. She looked at the device, then at Enzo. I can try, she said, but we have to move. The Falcones tracked my phone to the diner. They'll track your car here. We aren't safe. As if on cue, the building shook. A massive explosion rocked the lobby of the Rossi Tower 30 floors below. The alarms began to wail. They're in the building, Luca shouted into his radio. Security is down in the lobby. They used RPGs. Enzo grabbed Leo from Clara's arms. The panic room. Now. No, Clara shouted. They'll cut the power if the ventilation goes. We suffocate. We have to get to the roof. The helicopter. Enzo hesitated for a split second, then nodded. Roof. Go. Enzo handed Clara a pistol. She looked at it like it was a poisonous snake. "I don't shoot people," she stammered. "You do today," Enzo said. "Or they take Leo." That was all she needed to hear. Her grip tightened on the gun. They ran toward the private elevator. Enzo punched the code. The doors slid open, and a Falcone soldier was standing right there. Enzo didn't hesitate. He tackled the man, slamming him back into the elevator-mirrored wall. The gun went skittering across the floor. They grappled, fists flying. Enzo was strong, but the soldier was younger and faster. He landed a solid punch to Enzo's jaw, dazing him. The soldier reached for a knife. Bang! The soldier dropped. Enzo looked up, wiping blood from his lip. Clara was standing there, the gun smoking in her trembling hands. She looked sick, but she didn't look away. "Elevator's too slow," she said, her voice steady despite the shaking. "Stairs." Enzo grabbed Leo and they sprinted up the stairwell, 10 flights to the roof. By the time they burst onto the helipad, the wind was howling. The Rossi helicopter was spooling up the pilot, waving them over. But the Falcones were thorough. From the adjacent rooftop, a sniper shot rang out. The pilot's head snapped back. He slumped over the controls. The helicopter lurched, its blades spinning wildly. "Get down!" Enzo tackled Clara and Leo behind an AC unit as bullets sparked against the concrete. "We're pinned!" Luca yelled, firing back blindly at the other building. "There's too many of them." They were trapped, 30 floors up with the sniper on one side and a hit squad coming up the stairs. Clara looked at the duffel bag. Then she looked at the massive PA speakers mounted on the roof, part of the emergency broadcast system for the building. "Enzo," she yelled over the wind. "The speakers. Are they wired to the main security grid? Yes, why? Cover me." Clara didn't wait. She crawled across the open concrete toward the speaker junction box. "Clara, no!" Enzo screamed, firing his weapon at the sniper's nest to draw fire. Bullets whizzed past her. One grazed her arm, tearing the fabric, but she didn't stop. She reached the junction box, ripped the panel off, and jammed her lead-lined box into the wiring. She pulled out the prototype device and stripped the wires with her teeth, splicing them into the building's audio input. "Cover your ears," she screamed. "Cover Leo's ears, tight!" Enzo threw himself over Leo, clamping his hands over the boy's head. Luca did the same. Clara slammed her hand down on the activation button on the prototype. She didn't create a sound. She created a weapon. A high-pitched screech, amplified by 20,000 watts of industrial speakers, blasted across the rooftop. It wasn't just loud, it was a dissonance frequency, the fear frequency she had told Enzo about. On the adjacent roof, the sniper dropped his rifle, clutching his head, screaming in agony. He fell off the ledge. The door to the stairwell burst open. 6 Falcone soldiers ran out. But the moment the sound hit them, they collapsed. They writhed on the ground, vomiting, disoriented their equilibrium, completely shattered by the sonic assault. Clara stood by the box, her hands over her own ears, tears streaming down her face from the intensity of the pressure. "Turn it off," Enzo yelled, though he couldn't hear himself. He saw the soldiers were incapacitated. He ran to Clara and ripped the wires out. The silence that followed was deafening. Enzo looked around. The Falcone men were unconscious or groaning, unable to stand. "You did it," Enzo breathed. Clara slumped against the AC unit, exhausted. "We have maybe 3 minutes before their backup comes, or before the police SWAT team gets here." Enzo looked at the helicopter. The pilot was dead. "Can you fly?" Enzo asked Luca. "I can crash land." Luca grunted. "Good enough." They dragged the pilot out. Luca jumped in. Enzo buckled Leo and Clara into the back. As the chopper lifted off, leaving the chaos of the city behind, Enzo looked at Clara. She was bleeding, traumatized, and holding his son's hand like a lifeline. She wasn't just a waitress. She wasn't just a scientist. She was the most dangerous woman Enzo had ever met. And she was the only one who could save his family. "Where are we going?" Clara asked, shouting over the rotors. Enzo looked at the horizon where the sun was beginning to rise over the ocean. "We need a ghost," Enzo said. "We're going to Sicily, to my father's old villa. No internet, no cameras, just us." "And the device?" Clara asked, patting the black box. "You're going to fix it," Enzo said. "And then we're going to use it to destroy everyone who tried to hurt us." Clara looked at Leo. The boy was looking out the window, feeling the vibration of the helicopter. He turned to Clara and signed one word he had learned from a book. "Friend." Clara started to cry, but Enzo knew the war wasn't over. The Falcones had failed, but they had seen the power of the device. Now every criminal organization in the world would be coming for them. And in Sicily, an old enemy was waiting. One Enzo thought he had buried years ago. The Villa Rossi was a fortress of limestone and memory perched high on the jagged cliffs of Sicily's northern coast. Below the Tyrrhenian Sea, smashed against the black rocks, a rhythmic, eternal violence that Enzo Rossi had listened to as a boy. But tonight, the ocean seemed quieter than the storm brewing inside the ancient walls. It had been 72 hours since they fled the chaos of Seattle. 3 days of sweating through the humid Sicilian heat. 3 days of Luca patrolling the perimeter with a carbine rifle, and 3 days of Clara Mitchell transforming the villa's dusty vaulted library into a laboratory worthy of a sci-fi novel. Enzo stood on the sprawling stone terrace, the scent of blooming jasmine and sea salt heavy in the air. The sun was dipping below the horizon, bleeding red and orange across the water. It was beautiful, but Enzo didn't trust beauty. In his world, calm was usually just the breath before the scream. He lit a cigar, his hands steady, though his mind was a whirlwind. He was thinking about the Falcones, about the mercenaries Omicron would inevitably send, and about the woman inside the house who held his son's future in her trembling hands. "You shouldn't be out here," a voice said softly. Enzo turned. Clara stood in the archway of the French doors. She looked different from the waitress in the diner. The fear that had defined her posture for days was gone, replaced by a steely, exhausted resolve. She wore one of his oversized linen shirts, the sleeves rolled up to her elbows, her blonde hair pinned back haphazardly with a pencil. "The perimeter is secure," Enzo said, blowing smoke into the twilight. "Luca has sensors on the access road. If a rabbit crosses the line, we know." Clara walked to the edge of the balcony, leaning against the warm stone balustrade. She looked out at the sea, her eyes reflecting the dying light. "It's ready, Enzo. The modifications are done. The power grid is stabilized as much as it can be in a house built in the 1800s. Enzo felt a tightness in his chest that had nothing to do with the cigar smoke. And the risk. "Be honest with me, Clara. No doctor talk." Clara turned to face him. The breeze caught the loose strands of her hair. "The risk is always there. We are bypassing the ear entirely and stimulating the auditory cortex directly. If the frequency drifts, it could induce a seizure, it could erase memories. But I've triple-checked the algorithm. I've isolated the resonance." She paused, her voice dropping. "It's the only way, Enzo. We can't keep running with him like this. He needs to hear the world if he's going to survive in it. Enzo flicked the cigar over the railing, watching the embers fall into the dark lemon groves below. I never wanted him to survive in my world. I wanted him to be better than it. He looked at her, his dark eyes searching hers. You could leave, you know. After tonight. I have a plane waiting in Palermo. New identity, enough money to disappear forever. You don't have to be part of this war. Clara laughed, a dry, bitter sound. She looked down at her hands, hands that had served coffee to truckers and now rewired neural interfaces. I stopped running 3 days ago, Enzo. When you pulled me out of that diner, I realized something. Running doesn't save you. It just makes you tired. She took a step closer to him. The distance between them, usually filled with professional tension and the awkwardness of their situation, suddenly evaporated. Besides, she whispered, looking up at him, Leo trusts me. And I think I trust you. Enzo looked at this woman, this brilliant, terrified, dangerous woman who had saved his son when all his money and power couldn't. He reached out his rough hand, cupping her cheek. She leaned into the touch, closing her eyes. You shouldn't trust me. Enzo murmured, his thumb brushing her jawline. I'm a bad man, Clara. Maybe, she said, opening her eyes. But you're a good father. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was a collision of adrenaline and desperation, a sealing of a pact made in blood and high-speed chases. Enzo pulled her close, burying his hands in her hair, and for a moment, the war didn't exist. There was only the heat of her skin and the sound of their breathing. The moment shattered with the buzz of a phone. Enzo pulled away instantly, the mask of the Don slamming back down over his features. He pulled the satellite phone from his pocket. Talk to me, Luca. Trouble, boss. Luca's voice crackled, devoid of emotion. Sensors tripped on the North Ridge. Not a rabbit. 3 SUVs moving fast. No headlights. Enzo's jaw tightened. Renzo. Who else? Luca spat. Renzo the butcher. He must have bought the flight plan data from the Falcones. He's not here to talk, Enzo. He's here to liquidate the asset. How many? Thermal scans show at least 40 heat signatures. They're breaching the outer gate in 2 minutes. Enzo hung up. He looked at Clara. The softness was gone from his eyes, replaced by a terrifying, cold calculation. We're out of time, Enzo said. Renzo is here. He has an army. Clara's face paled, but she didn't panic. The procedure takes 20 minutes. Absolute stillness. If the power cuts, if the connection breaks. Go, Enzo ordered, pointing to the library. Lock the steel shutters. Engage the mag locks on the door. Put the noise-cancelling headphones on yourself and Leo. Do not open that door until you hear my voice, or a specific knock, 3 rapid 1 slow. Understand? Enzo. She grabbed his arm. There are 40 men. It's just you and Luca. Enzo checked the chamber of his custom 45, the metallic clack-clack loud in the quiet evening. He looked at her one last time. This is my house, Enzo said, and tonight I am the monster they're afraid of. Go. Fix my son. Clara turned and ran. Enzo watched her go, then moved toward the stairs, pulling an assault rifle from the hidden cache behind the hallway tapestry. The library was a tomb of silence amidst the gathering storm. Clara's hands shook as she strapped Leo into the modified dental chair she had dragged into the center of the room. The room was illuminated by the blue glow of computer monitors and the amber light of vacuum tubes warming up. Leo looked up at her, his big, dark eyes wide with confusion. He sensed the fear radiating off her. He reached up and touched her face. Clara forced a smile, signing with shaky hands. Sleep. Good dream. She placed the neural helmet over his head. It looked like a crown of black wire and sensors. She inserted the mouth guard. Then she placed the heavy industrial-grade noise-cancelling headphones over her own ears. The world went mute. She turned to her console. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, initiating the startup sequence. Target frequency 432. Neural mapping complete. Pathway status obstructed. She took a deep breath and hit execute. Outside the front doors of the villa exploded. Wood and iron splintered inward as an RPG struck the entrance. Smoke billowed into the grand foyer, filling the air with the smell of sulfur and ancient dust. Enzo crouched on the mezzanine landing, looking down through the marble balusters. He saw shadows moving through the smoke. The red lasers of rifle sights cut through the haze. "Luca left flank," Enzo shouted. Luca emerged from the kitchen hallway, a shotgun in hand. Boom! The first shadow dropped. Enzo opened fire with the rifle. Controlled bursts. Precision over volume. 2 men fell near the door, but more were pouring in. They wore tactical gear, faceless and heavily armed. Renzo hadn't sent street thugs. He had sent a paramilitary death squad. Bullets chipped away at the marble column Enzo was using for cover. Stone fragments sprayed his face, cutting his cheek. He didn't flinch. He strafed to the right, firing 3 shots. Another attacker went down. "They're moving to the stairs," Luca yelled, reloading. "They know where the rooms are." "Hold them at the landing," Enzo roared. He tossed a flashbang grenade over the railing. The explosion was blinding a wall of white light and concussive sound. Screams echoed from the foyer. Enzo vaulted over the railing, dropping 10 feet to the ground floor, landing in a roll. He came up shooting his pistol in one hand, the rifle in the other. It was a dance of death he had learned before he could walk. But for every man he dropped, 2 more appeared in the breach. "Rossi!" A voice boomed from outside, amplified by a megaphone. It was Renzo. "Give us the tech, and I'll make your death quick." Enzo fired a burst through the open door in response. "Come and get it, you fat pig!" Inside the library, Clara felt the floor shake. Even with the headphones, she could feel the vibrations of the explosions rattling her bones. The monitors flickered. The overhead lights buzzed and died, leaving the room bathed only in the emergency red strobes and the blue glow of the helmet. Leo's body tensed on the chair. His eyes were squeezed shut. On the screen, the graph line was spiking erratic peaks. Warning: external vibration detected. Synchronization unstable. "No, no, no," Clara whispered frantically, typing to compensate. The explosions outside were creating micro-tremors that were throwing off the delicate laser calibration of the device. If she stopped now, the sudden drop in neural voltage could leave Leo in a vegetative state. She had to push through. She grabbed the manual stabilizer joystick. She had to manually counter the vibrations like a pilot landing a plane in a hurricane. Another massive boom rocked the house. A vase fell off the shelf and shattered. The power grid whined. The screen flashed power surge imminent. The old generator in the basement was failing. "Come on," Clara pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "Hold on. Just 10 more seconds." The progress bar crawled. 95%. 96%. Enzo was out of rifle ammo. He tossed the weapon aside and drew his backup pistol. He was bleeding from a gunshot graze on his shoulder, and his suit was ruined. Luca was slumped against the wall in the hallway, clutching his side. "Boss, there's too many." Enzo looked at the heavy oak doors of the library at the end of the hall. He had to buy her time. 3 men rounded the corner, rifles raised. Enzo didn't take cover. He charged them. He moved with the desperation of a father protecting his cub. He shot the first man in the throat, kicked the second in the knee, and used the falling body as a shield to shoot the third. He reached the library doors and turned around, standing alone in the corridor. "Not one step closer," he screamed, his voice raw. From the smoke at the end of the hall, a hulking figure emerged. It was Renzo's lieutenant, a giant of a man, wielding a machete because he enjoyed the work. He laughed, stepping over Luca's prone form. "It's over, Rossi." 99%. The lights in the library surged blindingly bright, then went pitch black. The generator had died. The computer screens died. The hum of the machine stopped. "No!" Clara screamed in the dark. The process was incomplete. The neural pathways were open, but the final bridge hadn't been built. If the current dissipated naturally, the nerves would snap back and die forever. She needed a conductor. She needed to close the circuit manually. She ripped the headphones off. The sounds of gunfire were terrifyingly loud now. She fumbled in the dark, her hands finding the tuning fork, the original rusted piece of metal from the diner. It was wired into the mainframe as a fail-safe grounding rod. She jammed the fork into the port on the side of Leo's helmet. She grabbed the other end of the wire, stripped the insulation with her teeth, and wrapped the bare copper around her own wrist. "Please," she sobbed. She slammed her hand down onto the backup capacitor, discharging the remaining stored energy in the system through her own body and into the tuning fork. Crack! A bolt of blue electricity arced through the room. Clara screamed as 20,000 volts of residual current shot through her arm, seizing her muscles. It felt like her blood was boiling. She held on. She held on because she saw Leo's face in the blue light, peaceful waiting. She held on until the smell of ozone and burnt hair filled the air. Then darkness took her. Silence. It wasn't the silence of the deaf. It was the silence of the aftermath. The gunfire had stopped. The shouting had ceased. Enzo stood in the hallway, his chest heaving. The giant lieutenant lay dead at his feet, 2 bullets in his chest. But Enzo was empty. He had heard the scream from the library. He turned to the door. He raised his fist to knock the signal. 3, rapid 1, slow. His hand trembled. He knocked. Silence. "Clara." He tried the handle. Locked. "Clara." He stepped back and kicked the door. Once. Twice, the wood splintered around the maglock. With a roar of effort, he shouldered the heavy door open. The room was dark, smelling of smoke and copper. Enzo clicked on his tactical flashlight. The beam swept the room. It landed on the chair. Leo was sitting up. He had pulled the helmet off. He was unharmed. The beam moved to the floor. Clara lay crumpled near the console. Her arm burned, her chest rising and falling in shallow, ragged breaths. "Clara!" Enzo dropped his gun and ran to her. There, he fell to his knees, checking her pulse. It was weak, but there. She was alive. "Enzo!" Luca's voice came from the doorway. He was limping, holding his side. "Renzo retreated. The police sirens. They scared them off. The carabinieri are coming up the hill." Enzo didn't care about the police. He didn't care about Renzo. He looked at Leo. The boy was looking at the window. The blast had blown the shutters open. Outside, the storm had passed, and the first light of dawn was breaking. The wind was whistling through the broken glass. A high, thin sound. Leo's head turned. He tracked the sound. Enzo froze. Leo looked down at Clara. He heard her ragged breathing. His eyes widened. Then Leo looked at Enzo. "Papa." It wasn't a perfect word. It was slurred, guttural, the sound of a voice that had never been used. But it was there. Enzo felt his heart stop. "Leo." Leo smiled. He pointed to his ear. Then he clapped his hands. He flinched at the sound of his own clap, then giggled. Enzo began to weep. He pulled Leo into his arms, burying his face in the boy's neck. "You hear me? Oh God, you hear me?" Leo patted Enzo's back, feeling the vibrations of his father's sobs, but also hearing the sound of them. Clara groaned, shifting on the floor. Enzo reached out and pulled her into the embrace. The three of them sat on the floor of the ruined library, a tangle of blood, soot, and miracles. "We did it," Clara whispered, her voice raspy. She winced as she tried to move her burned arm. Enzo kissed her forehead, then her lips. "You did it. You saved him." "Enzo." Clara struggled to sit up. She pointed to the computer monitor. The backup battery had kicked in, and the screen had rebooted. "You need to see this." Enzo wiped his eyes. "What?" "The diagnostic scan," Clara said, coughing. "Before the system crashed, it mapped the history of his nerve damage. Look at the scarring pattern on the brain stem." Enzo squinted at the jagged lines on the screen. "I don't understand." "It's artificial," Clara said, her voice turning grave. "Those aren't natural lesions. Someone used a focused sonic burst to sever his auditory connection when he was an infant. It was surgical. Precise." Enzo stared at her. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying he wasn't born deaf, Enzo. Someone deafened him. On purpose." Enzo's blood turned to ice. Who would do that?" "The frequency signature matches early prototypes from Omicron," Clara said. "The kind your wife's family had access to." The world tilted on its axis. Isabella. Enzo remembered the arguments. Isabella screaming that she wouldn't let Leo grow up to be a killer. She wouldn't let him hear the orders, the gunshots, the screams. She wanted to take him away. "She did it," Enzo whispered, the horror dawning on him. "She knew my enemies used sound torture. Or maybe she just wanted to make him useless to the business. If he couldn't hear, he couldn't lead. He couldn't be the Don." He stood up, staggering slightly. His wife had mutilated their son to save him from his father's legacy. Enzo walked to the window. He looked out at the sunrise, at the smoking ruins of his gate, at the approaching flashing lights of the police. He had spent 4 years trying to fix what he thought God had broken. But it wasn't God. It was the life. His life. He felt a small hand slip into his. He looked down. Leo was standing there, holding his hand. Leo looked up at him and said one word, clear as a bell. "Bird." He was listening to the seagulls circling the cliffs. Enzo squeezed his son's hand. He looked back at Clara, who was being helped up by Luca. "We're not staying here," Enzo said. His voice was no longer the voice of a thug. It was the voice of a man who had walked through fire and come out the other side. "Where are we going?" Clara asked. "Omicron Pharmaceuticals," Enzo said. "We're going to buy it. We're going to burn the weapon division to the ground. And then We're going to build hearing aids for everyone who can't pay." He picked Leo up, but first, Enzo said, looking at the approaching police cars, "we vanish." Wow. Just wow. From a silent penthouse in Seattle to a shootout in Sicily. Enzo and Clara risked everything for a sound we all take for granted. Enzo Rossi thought he was the king of his world, but he found out that real power isn't in silencing your enemies. It's in giving a voice to the people you love. And that final twist, knowing his own wife had to disable their son just to protect him from his father's violent world. That changes everything. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, if you felt that moment when Leo first heard a bird sing, do me a favor. Hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Share this video with someone who loves a gripping, emotional thriller. And if you want more stories like this, where Mafia grit meets heart-stopping drama, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. Until next time, keep listening.